Matt Scratch here, and today I want to talk to you about changing the spark plugs in your car. Changing the spark plugs in your car can actually end up saving you money because when your plugs get dirty and fouled up, your engine's not running as good. It's not combusting the fuel as well, and it's not producing as much power, so it's going to struggle to do its job. So I believe the standard recommended interval for changing plugs is about 80,000 kilometers, or that in miles would be 50,000 miles, I believe. It could vary, so check your owner's manual, but changing them at 80,000 kilometers or 50,000 miles in my mind would be a good interval. So that's what I've done here. I've actually, this is one of my longest relationships with an engine. This is my little Neon plow car here, and this is a 2-liter single cam engine here, and I had this engine since 2011 when I put it in my other Neon, my first 2000 Neon that I used for plowing. It was the camouflage one for anyone who watched those videos, and the engine went in this black car shortly after I got it, so I put the engine in here. And so I've put 80,000 kilometers on it now since 2011 when I put these exact same NGK V-Power plugs in. These are my favorite plugs, and I put them in everything. So enough about this car in particular, but I just want to go through some tips, some general do's and don'ts. Number one, start with a cold engine no matter what. I think there are some exceptions to this. There are some technicians that I've heard on certain engines, they have found benefits to changing them hot, but generally if you change them hot, especially on an aluminum head engine, it's going to pick up the threads. It's going to want to, you know, basically bond with the threads, and you're gonna ruin your threads in your spark plug hole, which will cost a lot of money to fix. So you don't want to do that. So start with a ice cold engine. And yeah, so basically after that you need to get your plug wires off, and certain cars like these are easy, they just pull straight up like that, but on some cars they may be difficult. I've heard Volkswagens and stuff, some of them you require a special tool to remove the wire, and some of like older V8s and stuff, even some of them have heat shields and stuff around them, and they're difficult to get your hand down around the boot. So you don't want to pull on the wire ever. You only want to pull on the boot. So there are tools also for doing the old school V8s and whatnot that grab around the base of the boot and pull it off there, because like inside here there's a little metal clip. It's not going to show on camera, but that clips on the top of the spark plug. And so likewise, when you put it back in, when you install it, you want to make sure that that's clicked in there, that you feel it clip onto the plug. One other thing I want to talk about briefly is that I've heard of this myth, I'm going to call it, where spark plugs, they claim if you lubricate the threads at all or have any oil on them going into aluminum head, that you're going to have problems getting them out, that they're going to stick in. That is a myth I've heard, and I don't believe in it at all. I always put a drop of oil on my plug threads when I put them in, whether it's aluminum head or an iron head engine. I just believe in lubricating threads. When you put things together, things aren't meant to torque up on thread bind. So in 2011 when I put these in, they were put in with oil on the threads. So we're gonna prove that wrong right here. Couple different tools you can use to get them out is they have these handy T-handled tools that I have. I've used these before. On this, I'd rather just use a long extension and then a spark plug socket. So a couple little tips here. Sometimes if you don't have a tight fitting extension, it'll want to pull off when you go to pull the plug up out of the hole. So if that's happening, you can take some masking tape and or electrical tape or whatever you got, and just tape your socket right to the extension for that job. And then likewise, if you're having difficulties where it's sliding off the plug and the plug's falling back down in the hole, you can also just put a little piece of masking tape inside the socket and put it like the sticky side up and scrunch it in there, and then put it on the spark plug, and that'll hold it. And then if it falls out, you put another piece in, whatever, just to tighten that up, because they have a rubber in here. Like, you should only use a special spark plug socket, don't use a normal socket. So they normally always have this hex on the top, so they're pretty easy to identify, and they've either got a rubber in there to grip the plug, or some of them have a little tin clip in there that grips the plug. So either one will work fine, but if you're having trouble with it gripping, especially the rubber ones, I found just a little piece of tape in there will help you out. So with that said, we'll get started here. Oh, and I should mention also that when you're tightening them back up, it's good to have a torque wrench. I'm not going to use one here today, but it's a good idea to have one. So yeah, I just had to go grab my ratchet there. So there we go. First one broke loose nice and easy, coming out no problem. Sometimes they spin right away, sometimes they don't. And another thing I should mention, because this car has, you know, sealed boots that fit down around here and they keep all the dust and dirt out, I don't have to worry about it. But if you were doing like, here, I'll just grab the camera and give you an example of what I'm trying to say. Like on these 302s here. Oh, of course I don't have my flash on. Grab the light. You can see that down around the plug hole there's quite a crevice there, and so you want to get in there with an air gun, screwdriver, whatever, scrape it, blow it, vacuum it with a shop vac, whatever you got to do. You want to clean around there as good as you can before you go and take that plug out, because you don't want any grit or anything falling down into the engine that could score the cylinders on startup again. And then when I get it as clean as I possibly can, I actually drip a little 3-in-1 oil down around the base of the plug, or you can use motor oil or whatever. But what that does is it kind of keeps any dirt that might be left there, any micro dust, whatever. It keeps it there. It doesn't. That way, it won't just, you know, fall down. And also, it will help the plug come out easier. So back to the neon. So yeah, I got the first couple plugs out there, but they're actually coming out quite oily because I had a leaking valve cover gasket. I actually just replaced that last night, and so these tubes are full of oil from it leaking up through the seals there. So I shouldn't have that problem in the future, but I'm just about to crack this one loose, and this one looks like it wasn't leaking, like it was dry here, but all of these have been cracking loose easily. There we go, another one. It's nice and easy. Plugs do have a little carbon on them. This engine's starting to use a little oil. It hasn't had the easiest life, so. There we go, there's one that's not oily, and you can kind of see it. It's got a little carbon, and then that's like a fuel deposit. Most fuel injected engines get that. Carbureted engines not so much unless you're running them really lean, but anyways, they're definitely due to be changed. I don't typically use a torque wrench when I tighten them back up. I just use a small ratchet like this, and I just give them a good firm tighten by hand there. But I did look up the specs, and on this engine there, I don't know, I got conflicting specs. I got one manual said 13 foot-pounds and the other said 20 foot-pounds. 20 is actually kind of high. Most manuals do recommend somewhere in the 15 foot-pound range for spark plugs, so I would recommend looking up your torque specs if you're unsure and if you're not confident in your ability to just hand tighten it and not damage anything, because you definitely don't want to over torque them in aluminum, and there's no advantage to it either. They are not going to seal any better. That crush washer there is designed to seal under the recommended torque spec. So I want to get all that oil out of my socket before I put the new plugs in. Okay, and then gapping the plugs. You should have a gapping tool when you gap spark plugs. The recommended spark plug gap is normally written somewhere on a tag under the hood. It might be missing on this car, but I know like on the PT Cruisers there's a little tag on the bottom of the hood somewhere that clearly shows it. I know the gap for this is around 40 thousandths of an inch, and so I actually know because I've previously measured the blade of my pocket knife, my Swiss Army knife, and I know that it is right at 40 thousandths of an inch. So what I do, like you don't want to just install it out of the package. So I'll take it and tap it on some metal. I just tapped, I don't think you saw that on camera, but I just tapped that a little down, and that will, then I'll use my knife to spread it back to the recommended gap. This is a little redneck. I actually tried to, I've been having a heck of a day. First off, I couldn't find these spark plugs anywhere. I knew I had bought them last fall for this car, and I couldn't find them anywhere, so I looked for an hour and a half last night, turned my shop inside out looking for them, and I couldn't find them anywhere. So I figured, well, whatever, I'll go buy new ones, and they'll probably turn up hours later, but I'll buy new ones. So I went to the auto parts store to buy new ones, and guess what? They were sold out. And I just won't buy anything but NGK V-Power plugs. I've had such great success with them, so they were sold out of the ones I needed. So luckily I came back here and had another search around, only for about half an hour this time, and found the plugs. So I had a happy dance about that, and got on with my day. And on the way to the auto parts store to check for plugs, I did see something funny. I saw a guy in the back alley with a fishing rod casting down the back alley. So that kind of made my day, and I yelled out the window, "Did you catch anything?" And he had a good laugh, so that made my day. It was kind of worth the wasted trip to the store just to see that. But yeah, they didn't have a gapping tool either. You can get those discs, and they have the gaps going around, and it's like a tapered disc on the edge, and then you enlarge your gap until it's big enough to fit to the right spot. They have it numbered all the way around. So anyways, you should get some sort of gapping tool. So I've gapped that one, so now we're going to put it in, and I'm not going to worry about putting the drop of 3-in-1 oil on like I typically would, because honestly there's a lot of oil down in all of those from the valve cover gasket leaking, so I'll call that sufficient. And I'm not going to use the torque wrench either. Because they're oiled, they'll go down nice and smooth all the way in. and then I'm just gonna give them just a little bit like that, and that's all I did before when I installed the last set, and they all came out nice and easy. So yeah, just one hand on a short 3/8 ratchet and just give it kind of a firm pull, but don't overdo it. Just kind of like half a turn past where it snugs down at most. So, and then again, normally I would use my dielectric grease, and I would put a little bit, well, it can't hurt to put a little more, but I would smear it right over the end of that plug wire. And then, like I say, you want to get it all the way, seat it on there, push it down good, and then if you go like that, you can kind of feel it. You can tell it's on the head of the spark plug. So make sure that you kind of give it that little tug and make sure you can feel it all the way on there, because especially if you're installing new wires, I've had it where the little clip in there doesn't line up and it doesn't clip on proper. So you want to be watching for that. You could end up with a terrible misfire and not know why. So the thing I like about these V-Powers is, and I'm having a little trouble getting the camera to focus on it, but they have a little V right here on the tip of the electrode. And what that does is basically, and I've lit these up on the end of plug wires out of the car just to see, and it's really quite impressive. It kind of spreads out the spark like you've got your tight gap, but then this V goes down there, and the arc ends up going all the way down into the V, so you get a much longer arc even though you've got the same size gap. I wish it would focus better, but it's not. So, and one other thing, you want to keep your plug wires straight. I mean, this one's so easy, but there are some that are where you could easily mix them up on a V8 especially. It's pretty easy to cross a couple, so if in doubt, just label them with a little piece of masking tape, whatever. You don't have to have it with the in the correct firing order or whatever. When you label it, you can just go, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as long as you know that that's one, and you put it back there in the same spot, then you're good. So that's a good, that could easily cause you some confusion, because the engine might start up, but it would just be running really terrible, and you would wonder why. And so make sure you don't mix up your plug wires. That's important. It does matter where they go. So. So yeah, that pretty well concludes my video on how to change your spark plugs. If you haven't changed them for a long time, I can almost promise you that you will see an improvement in both performance and fuel economy by changing them. I highly recommend the NGK V-Power plugs. I've put them in about a dozen engines, everything from big block Chevys to small little 4-cylinders like this, and a bunch of stuff in between, and they seem to work great in just about anything. So that's why I still use them. So I'm all done here. That pretty much concludes my video on changing spark plugs in your vehicle. It's not that difficult on a vehicle like this where they're out in the open. It can get to be difficult on things like a V6 minivan where the back set of plugs is back there. There's certain vehicles you might have to disconnect a motor mount and roll the engine ahead or something to get at it. I avoid working on those kind of cars myself. I honestly do. I'm kind of picky about what I buy, make sure things are accessible, so I don't need that stress in my life. One other thing I should probably mention is if you own a modular Ford engine, like a 4.6 liter or a 5.4 liter Triton engine, be warned that those are prone to spitting out spark plugs or stripping out spark plug threads. They only have about 2 or 3 turns of thread in each plug hole, so if you're working on one of those engines, be very, very careful. I own a 4.6 myself, and as yet I haven't actually changed the plugs in it since I bought it because I'm a little scared myself. I have done them successfully before, but I'm nervous every time because I can't really afford to bring it to the dealer and get the Ford repair done on it. They can repair it in the car, but it's going to cost you, you know. So just be especially careful on those. Maybe grab a torque wrench especially for those and make sure you're not over torquing them or anything like that. And don't do them hot. Make sure it's cooled down and all that before you do them.